Hey there, and welcome to Brada Tales. Tonight, we bring you a chilling collection of horror stories set against the soothing sound of rain. Before we dive into suspense, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. If these stories send shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get comfortable, let the fear slowly take over, and tell us if you enjoy this kind of storytelling. Now sit back and relax, we're about to begin. What if everything you thought you knew was a lie? The question hung heavy in the air, piercing through the routine of everyday life. I leaned back in my chair, the creak of the wood breaking the silence of my small office. The dim light flickered overhead, casting shadows that danced on the walls. It was a typical day in the heart of the city, a city that thrived on secrets. I am Alex Mercer, an investigative journalist with a nose for trouble. My days often blurred together, filled with coffee stains and late-night phone calls, but today felt different. A low rumble in my gut warned me of impending chaos. I could almost hear the whispers of something sinister lurking just beneath the surface. The smell of damp paper and old books filled the room as I sifted through my latest leads. An anonymous tip had surfaced, hinting at corruption within the local government. My pulse quickened at the thought. Corruption was the lifeblood of the stories I chased, but this felt more personal. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, their gaze lingering just out of sight. Outside, the city buzzed with life, yet inside my office, I felt an eerie stillness. The sun barely penetrated the heavy clouds, casting an unsettling gray over the skyline. I glanced out the window, searching for the source of my unease. The street below was bustling, people moving about their business, oblivious to the darkness that loomed over them. A noise startled me, a sharp crack from somewhere down the hall. I froze, straining to hear. The sound echoed again, more pronounced this time, sending chills racing down my spine. It was followed by the low murmur of voices. My instincts kicked in. I knew I should investigate, but fear tugged at the edges of my courage. I stood, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing against my chest. As I stepped toward the door, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass. My eyes were wide, haunted by the knowledge of what lay ahead. I gripped the doorknob, hesitating for just a moment, then flung the door open. The hallway was empty, but the air felt charged, electric. I could sense the shadows stretching, twisting in the corners of my vision. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously above me as I made my way to the stairs. With each step, my heart raced, echoing like a drumbeat in my ears. Descending into the depths of the building, the atmosphere grew heavier, stifling. I was all too aware of how isolated I felt, cut off from the world above. The basement was notorious for its secrets, a place where whispers turned into roars. As I reached the bottom, a strange smell assaulted my senses, a pungent mix of mildew and something rotten. I gagged slightly, the odor curling around me like a sinister fog. The dim light barely illuminated the space, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and breathe. My breath quickened as I pushed through the heavy door. It creaked ominously, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. I stepped inside, the air thick with the weight of forgotten memories. Papers littered the floor, remnants of what once was. A desk stood at the far end, its surface cluttered with files and folders, some marked with red ink, urgent, important. But then I saw it. A flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. I turned, heart pounding, only to find nothing. Just shadows blending seamlessly with the darkness. I shook my head, forcing myself to focus. This was it, the evidence I needed. Rushing to the desk, I began rifling through the papers, scanning for anything that could provide a light. Names, dates, amounts, each detail painted a picture of a corrupt web of connections. But as I dug deeper, unease gnawed at me. The feeling of being watched intensified, prickling at the back of my neck. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the hallway, followed by hurried footsteps. My heart dropped. Someone was coming. I grabbed a folder and stuffed it under my jacket, adrenaline surging through me. I had to get out of there. I turned to leave just as the door swung open. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, blocking my escape. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't make out their face, but the tension in the air was palpable. "Who are you?" I croaked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Someone who knows too much," the figure replied, stepping into the light. The glint of something metallic caught my eye, a weapon maybe. My heart raced, and I felt the world around me constrict like a vice. In that moment, everything shifted. The familiar became foreign, and I realized I was in over my head. My mind raced as I searched for an escape route, the shadows closing in. I was caught between the darkness of the evidence I had uncovered and the threat standing before me. Panic surged through my veins as I backed away slowly, eyes locked on the intruder. The weight of the world pressed down on my shoulders, and I knew I had to act fast. In the chaos, I spotted a window behind me and escaped. I bolted, shoving past the figure just as they lunged for me. The world exploded in chaos as I leaped through the window, feeling the cool air rush past me. I landed hard on the ground below, pain shooting up my legs. But I couldn't stop. I scrambled to my feet and took off into the night, the darkness swallowing me whole. The shadows were closing in, and I knew I had to uncover the truth before it consumed me completely. I ran. The night enveloped me like a shroud, the cool air burning in my lungs as I sprinted down the alley. My heart hammered in my chest, a relentless reminder of the danger I had narrowly escaped. The shadows danced around me, morphing into ominous figures that seemed to whisper my name. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the silhouette pursuing me. But the alley was empty, silent except for the sound of my own breath and the distant hum of the city. Still, the feeling of being hunted clung to me like a second skin. I pressed on, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had just uncovered. The folder I had snatched felt heavy against my side, a weight of secrets that could shatter lives. Emerging from the alley, I stumbled onto a dimly lit street. The flickering streetlights cast eerie shadows that flickered like ghosts. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a reminder of the outside world that seemed so distant. I fished it out, my fingers trembling as I glanced at the screen. There was a missed call from my editor, a string of texts from friends wondering where I was. But all I could focus on was the folder. I needed to find a safe place, somewhere to examine the evidence I had risked everything to obtain. I turned toward a small cafe at the end of the block, its neon sign buzzing softly. It was a place I often visited, a hideout where the barista knew my order by heart. Pushing through the door, I felt a rush of warmth envelop me. The aroma of coffee and pastries filled the air, grounding me for just a moment. I scanned the room, searching for a quiet corner. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a couple sitting in the back, engrossed in conversation. I chose a table in the farthest corner, my back to the wall, where I could keep an eye on the entrance. As I settled in, I pulled the folder from under my jacket, my hands shaking slightly. I opened it cautiously, revealing a treasure trove of information. Documents, photos, and handwritten notes spilled out, each piece telling a part of a much larger story. My heart raced as I pieced together the puzzle before me. Names jumped out at me, local officials, businessmen with ties to unsavory characters, and a network of money flowing under the radar. My instincts screamed that this was bigger than I had anticipated. Each page I flipped through revealed deeper layers of corruption, links that seemed to reach far beyond the city limits. But as I dove into the details, a nagging feeling pulled at me. I was exposing something dangerous. What if they came looking for me? I pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the notes. There were references to meetings at obscure locations, coded messages that hinted at illicit dealings. Just then, the bell above the cafe door jingled, pulling my attention away. I froze, watching as a man entered. He was tall, with a dark coat that seemed to absorb the light. His eyes scanned the room, searching. My breath caught in my throat as he turned toward me. Panic surged through me. Was this him? The figure from the basement? I ducked down, hoping the shadows would cloak me. My heart raced as I strained to listen, fingers gripping the edges of the table. The man approached the counter, ordering a coffee in a low voice. I tried to breathe steadily, but every instinct told me to run. He took his drink and turned, making his way toward the back of the cafe. I couldn't risk being seen. I quickly shoved the folder back under my jacket, my mind racing. I needed to act fast. The last thing I wanted was to attract attention. I slipped out of my seat and headed toward the bathroom at the back of the cafe. Once inside, I locked the door and took a moment to collect myself. My reflection in the mirror revealed a pale face, eyes wide with fear. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to shake off the anxiety. Just as I began to calm down, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching. My heart sank as I pressed my ear against the door. They stopped outside and I held my breath, praying they wouldn't knock. Alex, a voice called softly. I know you're in there. My heart raced as I recognized the voice. It was Mia, a fellow journalist and my closest ally. She had been working on a separate investigation into city corruption, and I had shared some lights with her before. Relief washed over me as I unlocked the door and stepped out. Mia stood there, worry etched on her face. What happened? I saw you run out of that building. You look like you've seen a ghost. I grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the bathroom door. We need to talk. It's serious. We slipped into a corner booth, away from prying eyes. I quickly recounted the events from the basement, my voice low and urgent. Mia listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to determination. Do you have the documents? She asked, her eyes widening as I revealed the folder. As I laid out the evidence, her expression shifted again. This is huge, Alex. If this is true, it could bring down a lot of powerful people. But you know they won't let you walk away with this. I nodded, feeling the weight of the truth settle in. We need to find a way to get this information out safely. I can't do it alone. Mia's gaze hardened. We'll figure it out together. But first, we need to make sure we're not being followed. Just then, the cafe door swung open again, and I felt a chill run down my spine. A group of men entered, their demeanor aggressive, eyes scanning the room with purpose. I instinctively leaned back, feeling the adrenaline surge through me once more. Stay calm, Mia whispered, but I could see the tension in her posture. We had walked straight into a storm, and now we had to navigate through the dark currents that threatened to pull us under. The atmosphere in the cafe shifted like a storm cloud rolling in. The group of men moved through the space with an air of authority, their sharp suits contrasting sharply with the casual attire of the few patrons scattered around. I could feel my heart thudding in my chest, each beat echoing the urgency of the moment. I leaned closer to Mia, lowering my voice to a whisper. We need to get out of here. No. She nodded, her eyes darting to the men who had taken a seat near the entrance. I could see their faces more clearly now. They were hard and motionless. The kind of people who wouldn't hesitate to act if they felt threatened. I quickly scanned the cafe, searching for an exit that wouldn't draw attention. The back door, I realized, was our best bet. I could see it from the corner of my eye, leading to a narrow alley that would hopefully give us some cover. Follow my lead, I said, standing up slowly, trying to appear casual despite the rising tension. Mia mirrored my movements, her face a mask of determination. As we walked toward the back, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The men's eyes flicked toward us, and I felt a rush of anxiety gripping my stomach. Were they on to us? When we reached the door, I paused for a split second, taking a breath to steady myself. Here goes nothing, I murmured, pushing the door open. It creaked ominously, and my heart raced at the sound. The cool night air hit me like a wave, a stark contrast to the warm, cozy cafe. I stepped out into the alley, glancing back to make sure Mia was right behind me. We could hear muffled voices from inside, but the door closed behind us, cutting off the sound. Where to? Mia whispered, glancing around. The alley was dimly lit, with shadows pooling in every corner. I could see a faint light at the end, probably leading to a side street. Let's head that way, I replied, pointing. We need to blend in, not draw attention. We moved quickly but quietly, trying to keep our footsteps soft against the pavement. The alley was narrow, lined with old bricks that felt gritty under my fingertips as I brushed against the wall. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, a mix of fear and exhilaration. As we approached the end of the alley, I heard the door from the cafe swing open. My breath caught in my throat. I turned to Mia, my eyes wide with panic. We need to hide. There was a dumpster nearby, and I grabbed Mia's arm, pulling her behind it just as the men stepped out into the alley. They were scanning the area, their voices sharp and commanding. I could see one of them gesturing, pointing toward the end of the alley where we stood frozen. We saw them go this way, one of them barked. We'll split up. Check every corner. I pressed my back against the cold metal of the dumpster, my heart racing. I could hear their footsteps getting closer, and I held my breath, praying they wouldn't notice us. Mia looked at me, her eyes wide with fear, and I could see she was trying to think of a plan. I was terrified. All I could think about was the information we had and how close we were to uncovering the truth. But that truth came with a cost. Our lives were now at stake. The men moved past us, their voices growing quieter as they ventured further down the alley. I let out a shaky breath, relief washing over me. But we couldn't stay hidden for long. "Let's move," I whispered urgently. We crawled out from behind the dumpster and hurried down the side street, our footsteps muffled by the darkened asphalt. We turned a corner and came to a stop, catching our breath in the shadows of a closed storefront. I could feel the weight of the folder pressing against my side, reminding me of the stakes. "Mia, we need to get this evidence to someone who can help us," I said, my voice low but firm. "But we can't go to the police. They might be involved." She nodded, her expression resolute. "I know someone. An old contact from the investigative unit. If anyone can help us, it's him." "Do you trust him?" I asked, feeling a flicker of doubt. "Yes, he's good. He hates corruption as much as we do." "Okay, then let's go," I said, determination flooding my veins. We made our way through the winding back streets, sticking to the shadows. The city felt alive around us, but it was a hollow life, the kind that masked a deeper darkness lurking just beneath the surface. As we turned another corner, I felt a prickle of unease creep over me. The air was thick with tension, and I glanced at Mia. "Do you feel that?" She nodded, her brow furrowing. "It's like we're being watched." I slowed my pace, trying to listen over the sounds of the city. Then I heard it, a faint echo of footsteps behind us. "Someone's following us," I whispered, my stomach dropping. We ducked into a nearby alley, pressing ourselves against the wall, hearts pounding in sync. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, the fight-or-flight response kicking in. The footsteps grew closer, and I strained to listen. "They're right behind us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We needed a plan, and we needed it fast. My mind raced with options, but none seemed safe. Suddenly, I remembered a fire escape just up ahead. "There, the fire escape," I pointed. Mia nodded, and we darted toward it, the footsteps echoing closer. As we reached the base of the fire escape, I grabbed the ladder and began to climb, my heart racing. Mia was right behind me, and we scrambled up, praying we wouldn't be seen. The night air was cooler up here, the sounds of the city muffled below. We climbed onto the rooftop, breathing heavily as we crouched behind a vent. I peered over the edge, watching the alley below. The men had come to a halt, glancing around in confusion. I could see their dark silhouettes moving beneath the streetlights, looking for any sign of us. "This isn't going to last long," I said, glancing at Mia. "We have to make our next move count." She nodded, her eyes scanning the rooftops around us. "We can jump to that building," she suggested, pointing to a slightly lower rooftop. "On three?" I asked, my heart pounding. "On three," she confirmed. We positioned ourselves, adrenaline flooding our systems. 1, 2, 3. We leaped, landing with a thud on the adjacent roof. The sound echoed in the night, and I immediately looked back to see if we'd drawn attention. The men were still searching the alley, but I could see their frustration mounting. "They must have gone up," one shouted. "Let's check the rooftops," another replied. My heart sank as I realized we were running out of time. We needed to find a way to lose them fast. "Come on," I urged, grabbing Mia's arm. We dashed across the rooftop, the cold metal beneath our feet urging us on. "Where to now?" Mia panted, glancing back nervously. "Let's circle around and head toward the old warehouse. It's a bit out of the way, but it might give us some cover," I said, formulating a plan as we ran. As we moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were mere pawns in a game far larger than ourselves. The darkness of the city wrapped around us, and I wondered how many others had been caught in this web of corruption before. The stakes were high, and every step we took brought us closer to uncovering a truth that could change everything or end us. The thought pushed me forward, each heartbeat reminding me of what we stood to lose. The warehouse loomed ahead, its silhouette dark against the starless sky. A once bustling hub of activity, it now stood abandoned, covered in graffiti and crumbling bricks. I could hear the distant hum of the city, but in this moment it felt like we had entered a different world, a realm shrouded in secrets and shadows. "Are you sure about this?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I could see the trepidation in her eyes as we approached the entrance. The heavy door hung slightly ajar, creaking ominously with the slightest breeze. "We don't have much choice," I replied, glancing behind us. The men were still searching, their voices echoing faintly as they moved farther away. "We need to find a place to regroup and figure out our next move." Mia nodded, though uncertainty flickered across her face. We pushed the door open, stepping inside cautiously. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of mold permeated the space. I flicked on my phone's flashlight, illuminating the interior. The warehouse was a vast, empty expanse, the remnants of old machinery scattered about like forgotten memories. Shadows danced along the walls as I moved, creating an eerie atmosphere that heightened my senses. I could almost hear the whispers of those who had once worked here, their stories echoing in the silence. "Let's find a corner to hide," I suggested, leading Mia deeper into the warehouse. We ducked behind a large, rusted machine, its surface cold against my back. I took a moment to catch my breath, heart still racing from our narrow escape. "Do you think they'll find us here?" Mia asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we need to stay quiet and keep an eye out. They could still be nearby." I glanced around, noting the dust particles dancing in the beam of my flashlight. Each one felt like a reminder of the danger we were in. "We have to figure out what our next step is," I said, trying to focus. "We can't keep running forever." Mia pulled out the folder we had salvaged from the cafe, its contents a dangerous mix of documents, photos, and names that could unravel the web of corruption we were up against. "What if we start by looking through this?" she suggested, her eyes glinting with determination. I nodded, knowing how vital the information was. "Let's see what we've got." We spread the papers out on the dusty surface of the machine, the beam of my flashlight revealing the details. My heart raced as I sifted through the documents, noting names of officials and connections that hinted at a much larger operation. "There are reports here about suspicious financial transactions," I murmured, scanning the pages. And these names, they keep appearing. They're all connected to the city council. Do you think they're involved in something illegal? Mia asked, her brow furrowing as she leaned closer to examine the pages. It looks that way. This isn't just petty corruption, it goes all the way to the top. I could feel the weight of the information bearing down on me. We were standing on the precipice of something monumental, and yet the danger lurked around every corner. Suddenly a noise shattered the silence. A loud crash echoed from the entrance. My heart dropped as I exchanged a panicked glance with Mia. "They're here," I whispered, instinctively reaching for her hand. We quickly gathered the papers, shoving them back into the folder. I could hear footsteps approaching, voices growing louder as the men entered the warehouse. "Split up and search the place. They can't have gone far," one of them barked. "Where do we go?" Mia whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Upstairs," I replied, spotting a set of rickety stairs leading to a second level. "We need to get off the ground." We dashed toward the stairs, moving quickly but carefully. Each step creaked under our weight, and I prayed the sound wouldn't carry. The shadows enveloped us as we climbed higher, our breaths quickening with every step. Once we reached the top, I glanced around, searching for a place to hide. The room was dimly lit, filled with old crates and debris. "Over there," I pointed to a stack of crates in the corner. "Let's get behind them." We hurried over, pressing ourselves against the cold wood. I could hear the men's voices filtering up through the floor below, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. "Check up there." "They couldn't have gotten far," one shouted. I held my breath, straining to listen. The sound of their heavy boots thudding against the floor sent chills down my spine. We had to stay silent. "I don't think they saw us," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. "Let's hope it stays that way," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. As we crouched behind the crates, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. The longer we stayed here, the more dangerous our situation became. "Mia," I said quietly, "what do we do if they find us?" "We fight," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We can't let them intimidate us." I admired her bravery, but the reality of our situation weighed heavily on my mind. "We need to get this information to someone. If we can get it out there, it could expose everything," I said, trying to focus on the goal. Just then, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse, followed by shouting. The men were moving closer, their urgency palpable. "They must have found something," one yelled. "We need to go now," I urged. "There's a window over there. We can climb out." Mia nodded, her expression resolute. We dashed toward the window, glancing back to see shadows moving closer. I quickly pushed it open, the old frame creaking in protest. "Help me," I whispered, lifting Mia through the opening before following her. We landed on the ground below, the thud of our feet muffled by the dirt. I glanced around, trying to get my bearings. "This way," I said, pointing down a narrow path that led away from the warehouse. We took off running, the adrenaline fueling our escape. The sounds of the men echoed behind us, their frustrated shouts spurring us onward. As we ran, I could feel the weight of the folder pressing against my side. It was more than just paper, it was a lifeline, a chance to bring the darkness of the city into the light. Where to now? Mia panted, her breath coming in quick gasps. Toward the docks, I replied, remembering a place where we could potentially hide and regroup. We'll find a way to get the evidence to my contact from there. We raced down the path, our footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. The city was alive around us, but we were wrapped in our own urgent world, a world where the shadows were closing in and the truth awaited us in the darkness. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Its broken windows glimmered in the pale light of the moon, casting eerie reflections on the cracked pavement. I could feel my pulse quicken with each step we took, adrenaline surging through my veins. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Mia asked, her voice trembling slightly as we approached the entrance. I nodded, though doubt crept in. "It's an old distribution center. It should be abandoned, but there might be a way in through the side." As we edged closer, the sounds of the city faded into the background, replaced by the distant hum of machinery. It felt like we were stepping into another world, one where time had lost its grip. I could see the faint outline of graffiti on the walls, remnants of lives once lived here, echoing the stories of those who had come before us. We rounded the corner and found a rusty metal door, slightly ajar. "This could be it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We exchanged a glance, and without another word, I pushed the door open. It creaked ominously, the sound echoing through the empty space. The interior was dark, the only light filtering through the gaps in the boarded-up windows. Dust particles danced in the beams, creating an ethereal atmosphere. "Stay close," I instructed, scanning the room. The air was thick with a musty smell, a blend of mildew and rust. I could hear the faint sound of dripping water somewhere in the distance, punctuating the silence. Mia moved beside me, her eyes wide as she took in the surroundings. "It's creepy in here," she murmured. "Creepy can be good," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's see if we can find a place to hide or a way to gather more information." We crept further into the warehouse, my heart pounding. Shadows loomed in every corner, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Each step felt heavy, laden with the weight of our situation. We passed rows of empty shelves, their metal frames rusted and covered in dust. Old crates were stacked haphazardly in the corners, and I could see remnants of what looked like broken machinery scattered about. It felt like a graveyard of forgotten things, a place where secrets could easily hide. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the warehouse, making us jump. I turned sharply, instinctively reaching for Mia's arm. "What was that?" "I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Maybe it's just the building settling." "Or maybe not," I replied, my instincts kicking in. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We had to be careful. We pressed on, moving deeper into the shadows. I could see a staircase leading to a second level, partially hidden by darkness. "Let's check up there," I suggested, glancing at Mia. She nodded, though I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. We climbed the creaky steps, each footfall sounding like a thunderclap in the silence. As we reached the top, I peered into the dimly lit space. It was a large room filled with old office furniture and papers strewn across the floor. "This must have been their operations center," I said, stepping cautiously inside. Mia hesitated at the top of the stairs. What if someone is still here? I glanced around, straining to listen. The room felt empty, but I could still feel that prickling sensation at the back of my mind. Let's look for something useful, I urged, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We moved through the room, checking for anything that could help us. Papers lay scattered everywhere, some faded, others still legible. I began rifling through them, searching for anything that could lead us to the truth behind the corruption. Here, I exclaimed, holding up a document. It was a contract dated just a few months ago, detailing a deal between local officials and an unnamed company. The implications were staggering. Mia leaned closer, her eyes scanning the text. This could be what we need. But we have to be careful. If they find out we have this. I felt a wave of urgency wash over me. We need to take it and get out of here. No. As I tucked the document into my bag, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps below us. My stomach dropped. They're here, I whispered, my voice urgent. We need to hide. Mia's eyes widened in panic as we darted behind a large filing cabinet, crouching low. I held my breath, straining to hear. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the empty warehouse. Split up and search the second floor, a voice commanded, sending chills down my spine. They couldn't have gone far. I glanced at Mia and we exchanged a look of fear. We had to remain silent, to stay hidden until the danger passed. As the footsteps approached, I could feel my heart racing, each beat pounding in my ears. Stay calm, I whispered to Mia, though my own voice shook with tension. The men entered the room, their silhouettes casting long shadows against the walls. They must be here somewhere, one said, his voice low and menacing. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find us. The men moved around the room, their movements methodical and deliberate. I could see them rifling through papers, tossing them aside as they searched for any sign of us. Then one of them paused, looking directly at the filing cabinet where we were hiding. My stomach dropped as he stepped closer. Check behind there, he instructed, and I felt a surge of panic. The other man moved toward us, and I held Mia's hand tightly, trying to convey calm even as fear consumed me. I could hear my pulse in my ears, the sound drowning out everything else. Just as I thought we were done for, the man turned and began searching elsewhere. They must have escaped through the roof, he grumbled, frustration lacing his words. They left the room, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. We need to move, I whispered urgently, pulling Mia up from our hiding spot. As we crept toward the staircase, I could feel the weight of the document in my bag, a reminder of what was at stake. We needed to get out of here before they returned, before they could catch us and silence us for good. We hurried down the stairs, our hearts pounding as we navigated through the shadows. The back exit was our best chance, but we had to be quick. As we reached the door, I paused, my instincts flaring. Wait, I whispered, listening intently. A faint sound reached my ears, a low, growling voice that sent chills down my spine. They're coming back, I said, urgency flooding my voice. We ducked into a nearby storage room, closing the door silently behind us. My heart raced as I strained to listen, the darkness closing in around us. We had to find a way out before it was too late. Do you think they'll find us here? Mia whispered, her eyes wide with fear. I hope not, I replied, scanning the room for any possible escape routes. We just need to wait for the right moment. As we crouched in the shadows, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being hunted. The darkness felt alive, pressing in around us as we braced ourselves for whatever would come next. The stakes were higher than ever, and the clock was ticking. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? The question hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. I was standing in my cramped apartment, the walls closing in as I tried to shake the sensation that had crept into my mind. Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside, an unsettling quiet enveloped me. I lived alone. It was a choice I had made after moving to this city, seeking independence, a fresh start. The dim light from the street lamp filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows that danced across the floor. Each flicker of movement made my heart race. Was it just my imagination, or was something lurking just beyond my sight? As I poured myself a cup of tea, the kettle whistled shrilly, cutting through the silence. The sound echoed in my ears, amplifying the tension. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was safe. But the weight of the unknown pressed down on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out of place. The clock on the wall ticked rhythmically, a steady reminder of time passing. I glanced around the room, searching for comfort in the familiar surroundings. The framed pictures of friends, the cozy throw blanket on the couch, it should have felt like home. Yet as I sat down, I noticed a strange smell lingering in the air. A hint of dampness mixed with something metallic. It curled around me like a whisper, unsettling and persistent. I pushed the thought aside, trying to focus on the mundane. My phone buzzed on the table, a lifeline to the outside world. I picked it up, scrolling through messages, but they felt distant, like echoes from another life. Then it happened. A noise from the hallway, a soft thud, followed by silence. My heart raced. I leaned closer to the door, straining to listen. Was it just my imagination? Or was someone there? I told myself it was nothing, just the building settling. Yet the weight of my own thoughts felt heavier, wrapping around me like a shroud. With a shiver, I stood and moved to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, illuminated by the pale glow of the moon. But something was off. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My mind began to race, filling with images of all the horror stories I had ever read. What if someone was watching me? The thought was absurd, yet the feeling wouldn't leave. I returned to the couch, attempting to shake it off. But the sound returned, a scrape, slow and deliberate. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to check. The hallway felt like a dark tunnel as I crept toward the door. Each step echoed in my mind, drowning out rational thought. What was waiting for me on the other side? I grasped the doorknob, my palms slick with sweat. The cold metal sent a jolt through my body. Slowly, I turned it, opening the door just enough to peek outside. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a moment, I felt like a deer caught in headlights. The hallway was empty. Just a flickering light bulb casting an eerie glow. I stepped out cautiously, feeling the chill of the air wrap around me. I listened, straining to catch any sound, but only silence met my ears. That's when I noticed it. A shadow darted past the end of the corridor, so quick it could have been a trick of the light. I felt the breath hitch in my throat. My instincts screamed at me to retreat, to slam the door and lock myself away. But something pulled me forward, a mix of fear and curiosity. I took a step down the hallway, the floor creaking beneath my weight. The smell grew stronger, now unmistakably pungent, as if something had decayed in the darkness. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, drowning out all other sounds. Each step felt heavier than the last. I wanted to turn back, but the unknown called to me, a siren's song of dread. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The words felt foolish, echoing in the stillness. I knew no one was supposed to be here, but the unsettling feeling grew. Then came the response, a soft whisper, barely audible. "Help me." My breath caught. I looked around, desperate to pinpoint the source. The air felt electric, charged with something I couldn't understand. I felt a pull, a compulsion to investigate. With each step forward, the darkness seemed to close in, the shadows swirling and morphing, revealing hints of something sinister. My mind raced with thoughts, battling between rationality and the raw fear clawing at my chest. What awaited me at the end of this corridor? What secrets were hidden in the shadows? As I pressed forward, I knew one thing for certain. The night was only beginning. "Help me," the whisper hung in the air, chilling my bones. It felt like a phantom brushing against my ear, a breath of desperation that both terrified and intrigued me. The hallway stretched before me, a dark void where the flickering light bulb cast twisted shadows that danced like specters. I hesitated, caught between the instinct to flee and the urge to discover the source of the plea. My heart pounded, each beat a drum echoing in the suffocating silence. I could feel the chill of the air creeping up my arms, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I glanced back at my apartment door, the warm glow of my living room a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness that enveloped me. It would be so easy to retreat, to shut myself away from whatever horror lurked in the shadows. But the whisper echoed in my mind, an incantation that drew me forward. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The air felt thick, almost tangible, wrapping around me like a shroud. The metallic scent intensified, mingling with the musty odor of the old building. Each step I took was deliberate, my sneakers muffling the sound against the worn wooden floor. As I moved deeper into the corridor, I noticed something strange, a door at the far end, slightly ajar. A thin sliver of light peeked through the crack, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air. It felt like a beacon in the dark, calling me closer. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but curiosity gnawed at me, relentless and insatiable. I approached the door, my pulse quickening. The whisper returned, more insistent this time. "Help me," it was faint, barely a breath, but it pulled at me like a thread unraveling. I pushed the door open cautiously, the creak echoing ominously in the stillness. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the light coming from a flickering bulb overhead. It looked like a storage space, cluttered with old furniture and boxes stacked haphazardly. Dust coated every surface, and a sense of neglect hung heavy in the air. My eyes scanned the room, searching for the source of the voice. And then I saw it, a figure huddled in the corner, half hidden in shadow. My heart dropped. It was a woman, her eyes wide with fear, darting around the room as if expecting something or someone to pounce. She looked disheveled, her hair matted, clothes torn. Panic surged within me. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice breaking the stillness like glass shattering. The woman turned to me, her gaze locking onto mine. There was desperation in her eyes, a wildness that made me take a step back. "Please, you have to help me." "It's coming," her voice was raw, a plea that echoed the fear I felt deep in my gut. I took another cautious step forward, compelled by her fear, yet paralyzed by uncertainty. "What's coming? Who are you?" I managed to stammer, every instinct telling me to run, yet my feet remained rooted to the spot. "I don't know. I woke up here, I think they're watching us," she said, glancing around the room nervously. Her breaths came quick and shallow, as if she was fighting against an invisible force. "You have to get out. You can't stay here." The gravity of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked around, scanning the room for signs of danger. The shadows seemed to stretch and flicker, as if they had a life of their own. A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "Who's watching?" I pressed, desperation creeping into my voice. She hesitated, her eyes darting back to the door. "I don't know. I just feel them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It started with the whispers. I thought I was going crazy. But it's real. They're here." My mind raced, battling between disbelief and a deep-seated fear. What if she was right? What if something sinister lurked just beyond the edges of my perception? "Listen," I said, my voice steadying despite the chaos inside me. "We need to get out of here. Come with me." I reached out, trying to connect with her. But as I did, she flinched, recoiling as if I were a threat. "No, you can't touch me." "They'll know." Her eyes widened with terror, and I felt a surge of frustration and confusion. "Who will know? We can't just stay here," I pleaded, my voice rising. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging us into darkness for a split second before the bulb buzzed back to life. A sense of dread settled in my chest as I heard it, the soft, almost imperceptible sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway, a steady approach that sent a jolt of panic through me. "They're here." The woman's eyes were wild, her body trembling with fear. I turned, my heart racing as I realized the shadows at the door were thickening, swirling like a storm. "We need to hide," I shouted, scanning the room for a place to escape. The corners were filled with stacked boxes and old furniture. I grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a large wardrobe in the far corner. As we squeezed inside, I held my breath, listening. The footsteps grew closer, each step sending ripples of terror through me. My pulse raced as I pressed against the back of the wardrobe, the dark wood cool against my skin. We were cloaked in silence, the world outside the wardrobe fading away. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and I could feel my heart in my throat. I dared to glance at the woman beside me. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear. "Please don't let them find us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The door creaked open, and I felt the air shift as something entered the room. My breath hitched. What was out there? As the figure stepped into the light, I held my breath, waiting for the unknown to reveal itself. And then, in that moment of suspended fear, everything shifted. The night had only just begun. The air inside the wardrobe was thick with tension. Each breath I took heavy and shallow. I strained to hear the sound of the intruder, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The figure stood just beyond the door, obscured by shadows, yet I could feel an unsettling presence radiating from it. The woman beside me trembled, her fingers digging into my arm. I glanced at her, seeing the glint of fear in her eyes. "What if it finds us?" she whispered, her voice trembling like a fragile thread. "I don't know," I replied, trying to sound calm despite the chaos swirling in my mind. "Just stay quiet." The figure moved into the room, its silhouette dark and menacing against the dim light. I could see the outline of a long coat, its edges frayed as if it had weathered countless storms. The figure paused, and I felt the weight of its gaze, as if it were scanning the room for any signs of life. My body tensed. I wanted to bolt, to run back to my apartment and lock the door behind me, but the reality of the situation held me captive. We were trapped. The intruder stepped closer to the wardrobe, and I caught a glimpse of something glinting in its hand, a metallic object that reflected the light, casting eerie shadows on the wall. My breath caught in my throat. What was it planning? "Stay still," I hissed, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. As the figure loomed closer, I could see its features emerging from the shadows, sharp angles and a face obscured by a hood. The darkness seemed to cling to it, wrapping around the figure like a living shroud. I could hardly breathe, a primal fear rooting me to my spot. It reached out, fingers brushing against the wardrobe door. The moment felt like an eternity, every second stretching out like a taut string ready to snap. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would pass us by. Then, to my horror, the door creaked open slightly, just enough to reveal a sliver of the room beyond. I held my breath, heart pounding, as the figure peered into the gap. "Where are you?" The voice came, low and distorted, echoing like a distant thunderstorm. It felt unnatural, sending chills cascading down my spine. "Please don't find us," the woman whimpered softly, and I could feel her fear radiating off her in waves. The figure stepped back, frustration evident in its stance. "You can't hide forever," it said, and with that, it turned and began to search the room. I could hear the sound of boxes being knocked over, the scraping of wood against wood as it rifled through the clutter. The metallic object clinked against something solid, a sound that sent a shiver of dread through me. What was it looking for? Did it know we were here? My mind raced with questions, every possible outcome flooding my thoughts. The woman's breathing quickened, a sharp intake of air that felt deafening in the silence. I placed a finger over my lips, urging her to stay quiet, but I could feel the tension building, threatening to explode. The figure suddenly stopped, the room falling into an eerie silence. I dared to peek through the small gap in the wardrobe door. It was standing still, its back turned toward us, as if it were listening for something. I glanced at the woman. "We have to make a run for it," I whispered urgently. "When it turns around, we go." She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. The thought of running felt impossible, yet I knew we couldn't stay here forever. After what felt like an eternity, the figure finally moved, pacing across the room, back and forth, as if it were waiting for us to make a mistake. I could see the glint of the object in its hand more clearly now, It looked like a knife, its blade catching the flickering light, and I felt my stomach drop. "Now," I whispered fiercely. With a sudden burst of determination, I yanked the wardrobe door open and lunged out, pulling the woman with me. We rushed past the figure, adrenaline propelling us forward as I barely registered its shocked expression. We stumbled into the main room, and I heard the figure curse behind us. "You can't escape," it shouted, the voice echoing in the confined space. I grabbed the woman's hand, and we sprinted down the hallway, the sound of our footsteps reverberating against the walls. The fear in my chest felt like a living thing, pushing me forward as I led her toward the stairs. "Where do we go?" she gasped, glancing back. "Anywhere but here," I shouted, the urgency of the moment igniting my resolve. We reached the stairwell, the dim light casting long shadows down the steps. I hesitated for just a moment, unsure of where to lead us next. The oppressive darkness loomed behind us, and I could hear the figure's footsteps pounding down the hallway. "Come on," I urged, pulling her with me as we descended the stairs 2 at a time. Each step felt like a race against time, the echoes of our escape mingling with the pursuit behind us. As we reached the bottom floor, I glanced back and saw the figure at the top of the stairs, its silhouette framed by the flickering light. "You can't hide from me," it shouted, voice tinged with rage. We burst through the exit door into the cool night air, the streetlights illuminating the dimly lit street. I took a moment to catch my breath, the cool breeze brushing against my face, but there was no time to linger. "Which way?" the woman asked, panic evident in her voice. "Anywhere. Just run," I shouted, and we took off down the street, the adrenaline fueling our flight. As we ran, I could feel the shadows creeping in, as if they were alive, chasing us down the alleyways. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who was that figure? What did it want from us? Over there, I pointed to a nearby park, the trees casting ominous shapes in the night. We dashed toward it, hoping to lose our pursuer among the shadows. Once inside the park, I ducked behind a large tree, pulling the woman down beside me. We huddled close, our breaths coming in sharp gasps. I peered around the trunk, scanning the darkness for any sign of the figure. "Did we lose it?" she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," I replied, trying to calm my racing heart. "But we can't stay here for long." As we waited, the sounds of the night enveloped us. The rustling of leaves, the distant hum of the city, but also something else, a soft whisper carried on the wind. I shivered, the hair on my arms standing on end. "Help me," the voice was faint, almost lost among the sounds of the park. But I recognized it. It was the same voice that had drawn me into this nightmare. My mind reeled. "It's coming from everywhere," I murmured, grappling with the overwhelming fear that was closing in around us. The woman looked at me, confusion etched on her face. "What do you mean?" I turned back toward the path we had come from, the darkness feeling thicker, more oppressive. "I don't know how, but it knows we're here." The feeling of being hunted washed over me, a deep-seated dread that threatened to swallow me whole. I glanced back at the path we had taken, the darkness seeming to pulse with a life of its own. "We have to keep moving," I said, forcing myself to sound determined. "We can't let it find us again." We crawled out from behind the tree, every nerve in my body alert to the sounds of the night. The whispers continued, weaving through the air like a haunting melody. It felt as though the shadows were closing in, and I could almost sense eyes watching us from the depths of the darkness. I took a deep breath and led the way deeper into the park, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The night had many more secrets to reveal, and the whispers were just a prelude to the horror that awaited us. The park felt alive around us, the rustling leaves whispering secrets as we moved cautiously through the underbrush. Moonlight filtered through the branches, casting dappled shadows that flickered like ghosts dancing in the night. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, a relentless reminder of the danger we had narrowly escaped. "Where do we go now?" the woman asked, her voice quivering with fear. I could see the vulnerability in her eyes, and it struck me that we were both just two souls adrift in a night filled with uncertainty. "Let's find somewhere safe," I replied, scanning our surroundings. The path forked ahead, one leading deeper into the park, while the other twisted back toward the street. The whispers still echoed, an unsettling chorus that felt like it was closing in around us. As we moved, the darkness thickened. I could hear the soft crunch of leaves beneath our feet, and every rustle made me flinch. The figure from the storage room haunted my thoughts, its presence a shadow that clung to me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still searching for us. We veered left, hoping to find a sheltering tree or an abandoned structure. The air was thick with an earthy scent, mingled with something more pungent, something rotten. My stomach churned at the thought, but I pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. "Do you think it's gone?" she whispered, glancing back as we reached a clearing. I shook my head, unwilling to voice my doubts. We needed hope, even if it felt like a fragile thing. We stepped into the clearing, and my eyes widened. In the center stood an old gazebo, its wooden structure weathered and decaying, vines creeping up the posts like fingers trying to reclaim it. It was a strange sight in the midst of the chaos, a reminder of simpler times, but now it felt like a trap, a place where secrets were buried. "Let's hide in there," I suggested, pointing to the gazebo. It felt like our best chance. We hurried inside, the creaking floorboards announcing our arrival. The space felt cramped, shadows lurking in every corner as I pressed myself against the wall, trying to blend into the darkness. Once inside, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. The woman stood next to me, her eyes darting nervously, and I could see her trembling. "What if it finds us here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll figure it out," I replied, trying to sound confident. But inside, uncertainty gnawed at me. I could still hear the whispers, an ominous soundtrack to our plight. I crouched low, peering through the slats of the gazebo. The park was shrouded in shadows, but the moonlight illuminated patches of grass, creating a stark contrast between light and dark. Every sound felt amplified, each rustle in the bushes a reminder of our precarious situation. The whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony of disembodied voices. "Help me help us," they echoed, intertwining and wrapping around my thoughts like a vice. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block them out, but the dread seeped in, wrapping itself around my mind. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my voice trembling as I strained to listen. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. It's like they're everywhere." "Maybe it's just in our heads," I suggested, but even I didn't believe it. The way the night felt alive, charged with something malevolent, made me question every rational thought I had. Suddenly a crash shattered the silence. My heart raced as I spun around, adrenaline surging through me. It came from outside the gazebo, a sound like branches snapping underfoot. The woman grabbed my arm, her grip tight. What was that? I don't know, I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper. We listened intently, our breaths shallow, waiting for any sign of danger. The footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. I pressed my back against the wall, straining to see through the slats. My heart pounded louder than ever, each beat echoing like a warning. Then, just outside the gazebo, a figure emerged, tall and imposing, shrouded in darkness. My breath caught in my throat. It was the same silhouette, the same coat, but now it seemed to loom larger, more menacing. I froze, eyes wide. "It's here," I whispered, panic clawing at my insides. The figure stood still for a moment, scanning the area as if it could sense our presence. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a storm. "Help us, help me," they were louder now, a haunting chorus that pressed down on my sanity. I glanced at the woman beside me, fear etched on her face. "We need to move," I urged, feeling the walls of the gazebo close in. But before I could act, the figure began to move closer, creeping toward the gazebo with an unsettling grace. It reached the entrance and paused, staring into the darkness where we hid. "You can't escape," it said, its voice a chilling whisper that sent shivers down my spine. My instincts screamed at me to bolt, to run back into the shadows, but there was nowhere to go. The air felt electric, heavy with the weight of unspoken terror. "Stay quiet," I hissed, though my own voice trembled with uncertainty. I could feel the panic rising, threatening to spill over. As the figure stepped closer, I noticed something glinting in its hand, the metallic object it had held before. It was the knife, its blade gleaming ominously in the dim light. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "We need to find another way out," I whispered urgently, trying to think through the rising tide of fear. "Where?" she replied, her voice barely a breath. I glanced around the gazebo, desperately searching for an escape. The back of the structure was shrouded in darkness, and I couldn't see what lay beyond. But we couldn't stay here any longer. The figure stepped forward, looming at the entrance. "You can't hide forever," it repeated, voice low and menacing. I could feel the air crackling with tension, and a surge of adrenaline propelled me into action. "Now," I shouted, bursting out of the gazebo. The woman followed closely behind, and we sprinted away from the figure, adrenaline fueling our flight. We dashed toward the tree line, hoping to lose it in the darkness. The whispers surged around us, a chaotic symphony of despair. I could feel the figure close behind, its footsteps heavy and relentless. "Keep going," I yelled, pushing myself harder as we entered the thicket. The branches scratched at my arms, but I barely felt it. My focus was solely on escape. We stumbled deeper into the woods, the darkness enveloping us like a cloak. The whispers faded slightly, but the fear didn't leave. I glanced back, trying to catch a glimpse of our pursuer, but the trees obscured my view. "Where do we go?" the woman panted, her breath coming in gasps. "There's bound to be a road or something," I replied, though uncertainty gnawed at me. The woods felt endless, and the shadows stretched out like tendrils, reaching for us. We navigated through the underbrush, my heart pounding as I pushed forward. The rustle of leaves and the distant hoots of owls felt like echoes of a world that had moved on without us. Then in the distance I saw a flicker of light, a beacon in the dark. "Over there," I shouted, pointing toward the glow. It looked like a street light, its warm light cutting through the oppressive darkness. We pushed through the last of the trees and emerged onto a narrow street, the pavement cracked and uneven. The light was closer now, and I felt a surge of hope. But as we approached the street light, a chilling realization hit me. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent than ever. "Help us, help me," they called, drowning out everything else. I glanced around, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon us. "We have to keep moving," I urged, pulling the woman forward. "Where?" she asked, panic creeping back into her voice. "Anywhere but here," I replied, searching for a sign of safety. We walked toward the light, but something deep inside me warned that we were not yet free. The night held many more secrets, and the shadows were only beginning to reveal their true nature. As we neared the street light, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The whispers began to shift, becoming more coherent. "You shouldn't have come here, you can't leave." The fear surged back, overwhelming me as I gripped the woman's hand tighter. "We can't stop now," I insisted, but doubt crept in. What awaited us at the end of this path? The night was far from over, and the darkness was watching. The streetlight flickered ominously above us, casting a warm glow that felt almost foreign against the oppressive darkness surrounding the park. I pulled the woman closer, my heart racing as the whispers intensified, swirling around us like a storm of despair. "We can't stop here," I urged, my voice strained. As we reached the edge of the light, I scanned our surroundings for any sign of help. The street was eerily quiet, the only sound being the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. But there was something unnatural about the stillness, like the calm before a storm. "What if it finds us again?" she asked, her eyes darting nervously, searching for an escape. I could see the fear etched on her face, a reflection of my own growing dread. "Let's move toward the road," I suggested, pointing down the path that seemed to lead out of the park. "There has to be someone who can help us." We stepped cautiously toward the road, each step feeling like a leap of faith into the unknown. As we approached, the whispers transformed into a low, almost mocking chant. "You can't escape. You shouldn't have come." The words coiled around my mind, sinking deep like thorns. "Just ignore it," I urged, trying to drown out the disembodied voices. "We're almost there." The road was cracked and uneven, with weeds sprouting through the gaps. The dim light of the street lamp struggled against the encroaching darkness. I could feel the night closing in around us, suffocating and claustrophobic. As we walked, I couldn't shake the sensation that we were being watched. It felt as though unseen eyes were tracing our every move, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure from the storage room emerging from the darkness. "Do you think it's gone?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied honestly, my gut churning with anxiety. "But we can't stop. We have to keep moving." We continued down the road, but the whispers followed us, a haunting melody that echoed in the still night. "Help us, help me," they felt personal, as if they were calling out to us specifically, taunting us with the knowledge of our impending doom. The road began to curve, leading us deeper into an area I didn't recognize. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized how far we had strayed from familiarity. "This isn't right," I murmured, glancing at the woman. "I don't remember this part of the park." "Maybe we should turn back," she suggested, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "No," I insisted, feeling a surge of determination. "We can't go back to that gazebo. We have to find help." Just then I spotted a faint glow in the distance, a warm, inviting light that promised safety. It flickered like a beacon, and I felt a spark of hope igniting in my chest. "Look," I pointed. "Over there." We quickened our pace, my heart racing with each step. The light grew brighter as we approached, revealing a small diner nestled at the side of the road, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the night. "Maybe they can help us," I said, urgency lacing my voice. We rushed toward the entrance, the glass door swinging open with a creak. Inside, the diner was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The air was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of fresh coffee and pancakes. A few patrons sat at the counter, oblivious to the night's horrors. A waitress with a friendly smile looked up from behind the counter. "Welcome. What can I get you?" she chirped, but I could see her smile falter as she noticed the panic in our eyes. "Please, we need help," I said, breathless. "There's someone chasing us." Her demeanor shifted instantly. "What do you mean?" "There's a figure in the park." I hesitated, trying to find the right words, but the memory of the looming shadow flooded back. "It's after us." "Calm down," she said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "Just sit down. I'll call the police." The woman and I slid into a booth, still catching our breath. The din of the diner felt surreal, a stark contrast to the fear that coursed through me. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see the figure lurking in the shadows. But the street was empty, the darkness swallowing everything beyond the glow of the diner. "Is it really gone?" the woman whispered, her hands trembling on the table. "I hope so," I replied, but the dread in my gut told me otherwise. The waitress returned with a steaming cup of coffee, placing it in front of me. "You two look like you've been through a lot. Just sit tight, okay? Help is on the way." As she spoke, the lights in the diner flickered briefly, and a cold wave of unease washed over me. I glanced at the woman, who met my gaze, her expression mirroring my own concern. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice low. She nodded slowly. "What was that?" Before I could answer, the door swung open with a loud bang, and a figure stepped inside. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the tall silhouette from the park. The figure wore the same long coat, its hood obscuring its features, and it seemed to absorb the light around it, creating an almost palpable aura of dread. "It found us," I whispered, panic rising like bile in my throat. The diner fell silent, every eye turning toward the intruder. The waitress's smile vanished, replaced by a look of horror. "Get out," she shouted, and the patrons scrambled to their feet, chairs clattering as they backed away. The figure took a step forward, the whispers swelling to a deafening chorus. "You can't escape," it said, voice low and menacing, wrapping around us like a shroud. "Run," I shouted, pulling the woman up from the booth. We darted toward the back exit, adrenaline coursing through me as I pushed through the crowd of terrified patrons. As we burst through the door, I felt a rush of cool night air against my skin. But the moment was short-lived. The figure followed us out, its presence looming over everything, the whispers growing louder and more frantic. "Where do we go?" the woman gasped, looking around frantically. "Anywhere," I shouted, my mind racing. "Just away from it." We sprinted down the alley beside the diner, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the brick walls. The shadows pressed in around us, the darkness growing thicker as we ran deeper into the night. As we turned a corner, I spotted a small park entrance, another path leading into the dark embrace of the trees. "This way," I called, and we veered off, racing toward the shelter of the foliage. The moment we entered the trees, the whispers crescendoed into a chaotic symphony, the sound drowning out everything else. "You shouldn't have come here," they cried, taunting and menacing. I could feel the fear clawing at my insides, threatening to unravel me. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around us like a living entity. I glanced back, expecting to see the figure emerging from the shadows, but the night seemed to swallow everything whole. We stumbled deeper into the woods, pushing through the branches and underbrush, the air thick with tension. The whispers seemed to guide us, leading us further into the unknown. I had no idea where we were headed, but we couldn't stop, not now. And then, just when I thought we might be free, a loud crack echoed behind us. The sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, followed closely. The figure was still on our trail, and the night was far from over. "Keep running," I urged, adrenaline propelling us forward. The fear of what lay behind us fueled my resolve, but the uncertainty of what awaited us in the shadows loomed just as large. The darkness was watching, and I had a sinking feeling it wasn't done with us yet. Thank you for listening till the end. I hope you were able to relax and will now get a good rest. And don't worry, new stories are already on the way for tomorrow, so don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to stay connected. Now have a good night. See you in the next episode.